Hi, in this last video, we're going to be talking about how we can look at a pedigree that doesn't give us any information about the inheritance pattern and determine what that inheritance pattern is. Most of the traits that we now know what they are, whether they're dominant, recessive, autosomal, sex-linked, etc., we know because of interpreting family information in pedigrees. So, the most fundamental question we can ask is the trait dominant or recessive? And our best bet of being able to tell for sure is if there's a difference in the kid's phenotype compared to both of the parents. So if the trait is showing a recessive trait, meaning the recessive ones are filled in, then if the kid has it, but the parents don't, it has to be recessive. And the reason for that is the parents have to be carriers. So they have the allele they're passing on to their kid, but they're not expressing it. So that would have to be a recessive trait. Don't forget that carriers are only present and only exist for recessive traits. So if the pedigree shows carriers listed, it's got to be a pedigree of a recessive trait. Don't make the conclusion, though, that if carriers aren't listed, it's dominant, because remember, not all pedigrees show carriers. Determining 100% positively that a pedigree is showing a dominant trait is much trickier. That's because with homozygous dominance, you never know for sure that there isn't a heterozygous in there that's just not showing up. But there are a couple clues that help us determine that, maybe it is a dominant pedigree. The first one is it's probably dominant if every child has at least one parent that has it. This is especially true for bigger pedigrees. Then you're less likely to see that situation where the parents have one thing and the kids have something completely different. Another clue that the pedigree you're looking at is probably dominant is if one parent has it, the other doesn't, and most of the kids have it. So if that's the case, then that parent who has it is most likely homozygous dominant, and you're going to see that trait in the kids much more often. Finally, the one clue that definitely tells us that the trait we're looking at is a dominant pedigree, is that if both parents have it and the child doesn't, then both parents have to be showing the dominant trait, but also heterozygous, so that the kids can inherit the recessive allele from both. So let's try this out. Here we see that we have a pedigree of 4 generations. In our 3rd generation, we have a set of parents that do not have the trait. However, they have kids that do. This tells us that if this kid is going to have the trait, he has to inherit the allele from both parents. Therefore, both parents have to be carriers, and this has to be a recessive pedigree. Taking a look, what do you think this trait is? If you answer that this is a recessive pedigree, you're absolutely right. And the way that we know that is that there are carriers shown. Carriers always indicate recessive traits. Be careful, though. Here we see that exact same pedigree. Take a look. Let me go backwards. Same exact thing. But this one does not show carriers. And it is possible for this pedigree to be dominant. In this case, every child that has it has a parent with it. And so we can't conclusively rule one way or the other. And so this one could be dominant or it couldn't be. So once again, be careful. On the previous slide, it was definitely recessive. In this one, we can't conclusively decide that. Take a look at these pedigrees. There are a number of clues that tell us that we're looking at dominant pedigrees. The first of which is this here. We have every child that has it has a parent that also has it. So we don't have that situation where parents have one thing and kids have a different thing. Take a look at this information. Here we have one parent that has it and all of the kids have it. Most likely that means that Pam in this pedigree is homozygous dominant. And so Bill, who's going to be recessive phenotype, is going to have homozygous recessive. All of the kids then will have it because all of the kids are going to get Pam's homozygous dominant. It's not guaranteed that she's homozygous dominant. It's just a pretty safe bet since all of the kids have it. Our last clue is Sam. Sam doesn't have it. Both of his parents do. So Sam must have a recessive allele because his parents have to be carrying that recessive allele in order to give it to him. So this has to be a dominant pedigree. The one on the right, we're not as certain because we don't have that parents have it, kids don't situation. Another pattern of inheritance that we can tell by looking at pedigrees is whether a trait is sex-linked or autosomal. So if it's sex-linked, it's more common in males. It's not a guarantee, but most of the time we'll see that it's more common in males. It is important to note that females can have sex-linked traits, it's just less common. Couple of clues though. Only females can be carriers. Of course, they can only be carriers for recessive traits, but you'll never see a male that's a carrier. Another clue, remember, is that males get their X chromosomes from their mom. And females get it from both parents. So consequently, if it's a sex-linked dominant trait, males that have it, their daughters must also have it. Because males only have that one X, and their daughters are going to get an X from both parents. And so if it's dominant, that will be carried on in the female, and the daughter must also have it. If it's sex-linked recessive, if daughters have it, they have to have gotten it from their daughter or from their dad. That's because they have to get it from both parents in order to inherit it. I don't have this in your notes, but you may want to make a note that guys always get their sex-linked trait from their mom. And so consequently, if a guy has it, the mom at least has to be a carrier. Finally, if the trait occurs pretty equally in both males and females, then most likely it's an autosomal trait. Let's look at some examples. Here we have a pedigree that is X-linked and it's recessive. So we have a couple of clues. First off, look, there are no carriers that are males. All of the carriers listed are females. Another clue that this is sex-linked is if we take a look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 males that have it, and only one female that has it. Here's another clue. We have a male that has it. His mom has it. We have another male that has it. We have a male that has it. His mom is a carrier. Here's another male that has it. His mom is a carrier. Another male that has it. His mom is a carrier. And same thing for the last one. So remember that males get it from their mothers. Our last clue is this girl down here. Generation 4 and 7. So female 4-7 has the recessive trait. That means she has to have gotten it from both parents. The only way that's possible is if her dad has it and her mom was at least had one allele, in which case she does. Take a look at this pedigree. What conclusions can you make about it? First thing to notice is we have a child who has a trait whose parents don't have it. So in this case, the child is filled in, which means that she has a trait her parents don't have, which means that she has a recessive trait. So we conclude that this trait is a recessive trait. Next thing we can notice is that the daughter has it and the father does not. Remember that if it's a recessive trait, daughter has to get one allele from mom and one allele from dad. And dad only has one allele for sex-linked. And so since dad's one allele isn't the recessive trait, this must be an autosomal pedigree. What can you conclude about this pedigree? First off, this one has carriers indicated. So we don't need to do any more analysis. We know that this pedigree is mapping a recessive trait. Secondly, let's make some conclusions about the members of the family. When we look at this, of the 6 individuals who express the trait, 5 of them are males. So we are pretty certain already that this is most likely a sex-linked trait. We can also tell that there are a number of carriers indicated, and all of them are females. Another clue that this is a sex-linked trait. Take a look at those 4 males. They're all sons of mothers who are carriers, and some of their sons have it and some of their sons don't. Remember that sons only get their X's from mom. And so if mom is a carrier and some have it, some don't, pretty good chance that it's sex-linked. If we look at 2-5 and 3-7, here we have a daughter that has it and a dad who has it. And remember that for a recessive trait, if a daughter has it, she has to have gotten one from a carrier mother and one of the alleles from her father. And since dads only have one, the dad has to have it as well. Finally, when we look at this mother-son combo, we see that mom has it. Boys have to have it because remember, guys get their own one and only X allele from their mom, and if mom has it, both of the alleles for a recessive trait have to be passed on to her son. And so this has to be sex-linked. All right, now go and try some of the pedigrees in your packet and see what you can figure out.